this afternoon's Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Christian Bone. I'm Chief Executive of Care Development East, and I'll be hosting this afternoon's webinar. Just a few housekeeping things. Because it's a webinar, you won't be able to use your microphones today, but if you have any questions, you can submit those using the chat facility. And as I mentioned early on, that can be accessed at the bottom of your screen. There's a small icon and you can just put any questions in the chat. And during the course of the presentation, I'll be monitoring that. And then if there's an opportunity, we'll answer questions as we go along. So this afternoon's webinar is also being recorded. So if you have to pop off at all, or if you have any colleagues who you think would benefit from hearing about the legislation that's required in care settings and safe practice, we will send you the link after today's event. I'm very pleased to welcome our speaker for today, Neil Young from Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service. Neil has a lot of experience of working with all sorts of businesses and advising on correct practice in terms of fire safety and the do's and don'ts. Neil, I'll let you explain a little bit more about your role at Suffolk Fire and Rescue, and I'll also give Neil an opportunity to set himself up and share his presentation as well. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy this afternoon's event. And as I say, if you do have any questions during the course of the webinar or any technical issues at all, do just pop those in the chat and I'll see if I can help you out. Okay, Neil, over to you.
Lovely, thank you, Christian. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for attending the session this afternoon on a Friday afternoon. Hopefully it will be really useful for you all, give you a bit of an oversight of what we do from the fire service point of view. And what is that we do? So my role is a fire safety inspecting officer. It's an enforcement role within the service. And what we do is go out, make sure that all premises are compliant with the fire safety order. And we'll cover a little bit more of that within the actual presentation as well. It was supposed to be with my colleague Wayne, but unfortunately he couldn't attend, so apologies for that. Wayne's done many, many more years than I have. I've done a couple of years within the department within fire safety, but I've done 15 years on the actual fire appliances on the trucks. And I'm still currently a on-call firefighter as well, on-call watch commander in Ipswich as well. So I still have an operational background, which is really useful for the fire safety side and vice versa. So what I'm going to do is I'll start the presentation and we'll go through some of the slides, and yeah, any questions, do use the chat facility. I will answer as much as I can. Anything I'm unable to answer, I will put my email address into the chat at the end. Feel free to email any questions over and we will get a suitable answer for you. So thank you.
Okay, we can see the presentation, Neil.
Yeah, everyone can see that? Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you, Christian. Okay, so yeah, the presentation, as I said, is to cover the responsibilities of care home providers such as yourselves from the fire safety perspective. Obviously, fire safety is very, very high on our list of priorities, being in the fire service, but sometimes it's not quite so high on the list of some of the premises we go to. Care homes tend to be a lot better at it than say your little local corner shops and some pubs, but it is just to cover the responsibilities that you have under the fire safety order. What we'll also talk about is some of the common findings that we've come across recently, and then hopefully we can elaborate on those a bit more within the actual presentation, and hopefully help you identify some of these issues going forward that you may not be aware of, or you may be aware of and not knowing how to deal with. So what is the legislation that we use in the UK as part of the ensure fire safety across the board, and especially in residential care premises? So some of you may be aware of it. So it's a rhetorical question, so feel free to answer if you want to, but what we use in the UK is the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005. It was introduced in 2005, but wasn't actually enacted until the 1st of October in 2006. This was because additional guidance was written for rearing, well, pretty much every premises was covered to help introduce the new system and help introduce people to how to deal with their fire safety for themselves. Prior to that, it was everything was covered under the Fire Precautions Act in 1971. There was a lot of bits and pieces missing out of that for a lot of premises, and wasn't really targeted at every type of premises that we may come across. So there are over 200 pieces of legislation which are all amalgamated together to produce the Regulatory Reform Order in 2005. We still find, even 16, 17 years later, that people still haven't heard of it and what their responsibilities are under it. But hopefully most of you may have some understanding of it at least. So what does it do? So it places a statutory duty on the responsible person, often referred to as the RP, of the premises to ensure the safety from fire of relevant persons in or around the building. And it covers, as I said, all premises except single private residential dwellings. So it covers everything from your small corner shop up to hospitals, hotels, residential care homes, factories, etc. The guidance that's, if you need more guidance on it, you can have a look on the government website, which is www.gov.uk. And if you type in fire safety on there, it will bring up the suite of documents that relates to the premises. And care home residential premises actually has its own guidance document. A lot of the information is generic across the guidance, but then there's sections in there that relate to the type of premises. So it's well worth having a look. It's a lot easier to read than the fire safety order itself. So it makes a lot more sense. So it's definitely worth having a look on the website for that and having a bit of a read through to gain a better understanding. So I spoke about RP, or responsible person. So who is a responsible person? Now, this one always causes a little bit of confusion because you'll have people with responsibility, but they may not necessarily be the responsible person. And the reason behind that is because a responsible person may well be a corporate body. So it may not be a specific one person. It might be a corporate body, and then they will be responsible for all the fire safety involved, but they may then delegate that information down, but hold ultimate responsibility for ensuring that premises is safe in the event of fire. So we use a hierarchy under the order. So Article 3 gives us a actual meaning of a responsible person. So I'll read that and then I'll elaborate a little bit more on each section. So Article 3, Part A, in relation to a workplace, the employer of the workplace is to any extent under his control. B, in relation to any premises not falling in with paragraph A, the person who has control of the premises as occupier or otherwise in connection with the carry on of him of a trade, business or other undertaking for profit or not, or the owner, where the person in control of the premises does not have control in connection with the carrying on of that person of a trade, business or other undertaking. And that's all written in legislation jargon, which is sometimes a little bit hard to understand. So I'll try and break it down and make it a little bit easier. So the hierarchy that we will try and find and locate when we're carrying out our inspections. So the employer, so that's the person we'll go to because they're normally a person or a corporate body that you can actually identify with. Often it's if it's a corporate body under Companies House, we can locate and find out exactly who that employer is. So for example, I'm a firefighter as a job role, if you like, but my employer and responsible person is Suffolk County Council. So if I was enforcing on my own fire service, I would actually go to Suffolk County Council as the employer, and they would be the responsible person. The occupier, so you have a premises that may well be owned by somebody else, but they're just occupying it, but they may not have, might have employees, or they might not run a specific business from there. So they're not employing anybody, so they're not employers. So we talk to them about as an occupier of a premises, but they don't own the premises. So we would then speak to them and they would be the responsible person. Then you have the owner. As the hierarchy goes down, you may think, well, sure, you'd go for the owner of a premises first, but more often than not, owners of premises don't always reside in this country. They just have that as a part of their estate, as part of their assets, and they're often quite hard to get hold of these people. So the responsible person goes up to the hierarchy of back to the employer as a first port of call. So hopefully that makes sense to people. It is a little bit confusing because once you get down to that point of finding out who that RP as the employer, they may well stipulate or delegate part of that responsibility to the management, which is probably where you fall into care home premises, as the management will have a responsibility under that and have a duty to comply with the fire safety order. So now we've ascertained who our responsible person is, what does the order require from you? There's several articles in the order that you actually have to comply with, and these are the articles that we look at when we come around to the premises. And we'll go a little bit more on the articles just a little bit later on. So what does the order require? So you need to carry out a fire risk assessment of your premises and review it regularly. When we say regularly, we should be annually as a minimum, or if there's any significant changes to the premises. So if you alter any layout of the premises, or you may move residents around because of their vulnerabilities, or you may have new residents, then you need to update your risk assessment. And that way you'll always be on top of any changes that may affect the evacuation plans you've got in place, or the actual processes you have regarding your fire safety measures. You also need to inform your staff and their representatives of any of the risks that have been identified by the fire risk assessment. So your staff should all be informed of anything that's certainly of a higher risk, and any risks and any measures that have been taken to mitigate those risks. You should put in place and maintain appropriate fire safety measures. It's a difficult one to stipulate exactly what these fire safety measures will be, because they're going to be site specific. So one premises may have a completely different setup for fire safety measures to another. And that comes down to putting the risk back to the responsible person, as that is their responsibility to manage that risk. But fire service will help you with that if we can, and we're certainly not here to try and catch you out, and certainly offer advice on how you can achieve those measures. Should plan for an emergency, so have a suitable emergency action plan in place to ensure all residents are either moved to a safe place, which we'll carry on and talk about that a little bit in a moment, and then ultimately to a place of ultimate safety, and to ensure their safety at all times. And should provide staff information, fire safety instruction and training to ensure that your staff know what to do in the event of a fire, and goes to handling fire extinguishers if they're suitably trained to do that. Fire marshals are another thing that we come across, and they should have a higher awareness and a higher level of training if that's something you have to introduce as part of your fire safety measures. So the fire safety order is a fire risk assessment based approach. So what we mean by that is we see what the problem is, and then we see how we can deal with that problem, what measures we can put in place, and how we can either eliminate it, reduce it, isolate it, control it, what we may be able to put in place to mitigate those risks and those hazards that we may come across. So we said a lot about fire risk assessments there. Hopefully you all understand what that is, but we will just cover it briefly. So a fire risk assessment. You as a responsible person must ensure that a fire risk assessment has been carried out and the focus on the safety of all relevant persons in the case of fire. So when we say a fire risk assessment, that needs to be a written document that can, as I say, you can then use that for staff training. You can use that to inform people, and then you can also use that to record any changes and findings that you make regarding fire safety. And when we say relevant persons, who is a relevant person? So the order itself, fire safety order, stipulates a relevant person is anybody who's lawfully on the premises. So obviously if someone breaks in, they're not lawfully on the premises. But everybody else who steps foot across that threshold of the front door is classed as a relevant person. And it also extends to the surrounding area of the premises as well. So, for example, that will indicate if there's any kind of possible collapse following a fire, if anybody's walking past, they're still classed as a relevant person. So under our fire risk assessment, as we keep mentioning often referred to as an FRA, we keep mentioning those words. The government again have created a 5-step checklist to write a fire risk assessment, and I hope you can see that on there. Again, it's on the government website, which I've put the website address on there, and if you need that, I can always put it on into the chat as well. And that gives you a 5-step process, so you can identify the hazards, identify the people who are at risk, evaluate that level of risk and what actions, and then you're going to record, plan and train for that eventuality and continually review it. So try to simplify it down. But fire risk assessment certainly for a care home is a more complex document that under the order, anybody can write one of these fire risk assessments. It doesn't stipulate, but it should be done by a competent person. And how do we achieve competency? How do we improve competency? So there is companies out there, organisations out there that are third-party accredited. So fire risk assessors are registered with them. They're checked for their competency levels. Moving forward, I think competency is going to become a big factor post Grenfell as well, and the review following that tragic incident. That competency is going to be a big factor, and it will be, people will be checked, and fire risk assessors will be checked. They know what they're doing. Currently, you can be a fire risk assessor with no real background in fire, but it's such a complex subject that you really do need to be able to show competency, especially for residential care homes because of the nature. So the two on the screen there is Institute of Fire Engineers and Institute of Fire Safety Managers. So if you need to have a fire risk assessment done, if you Google either of those, IFE or IFSM, it will bring up a list of registered fire risk assessors that have been deemed competent and certified. And it's normally a good place to start to get a really good fire risk assessor to carry out your fire risk assessment. Some companies have their own fire risk assessors, but again, as long as that competency is proven, then they should be okay to write that fire risk, write that document. What we do find is a lot of fire safety is drafted in with health and safety. Now, health and safety has its whole ream of own legislation, which I'm sure you're all aware of, but fire safety is standalone legislation, and we do find it is drafted in with health and safety and almost an add-on, but it should be standalone. So what we recommend is your fire risk assessment is the first part of your fire safety folder. And I've definitely seen quite a few as I've done some audits around the county, and it's getting more prevalent. Got a nice folder on the shelf there, fire risk assessments in it, all the training documents are in it, all the recording of maintenance and of all the fire safety measures that you've got in place are all in it as well. And that makes it stand out a lot more. And that's the sort of information that we need to carry out the audit to ensure compliance. And also, God forbid there is an incident, if it goes to a court of law, you've got all that documentation there proving that you've done everything that you can possibly do to make that place as safe as you possibly can from fire and keeping everybody in it safe. So if we're writing our fire risk assessment, what should we have in it? So the order requires fire risk assessment to include the measures to reduce or eliminate the risk of a fire and identify the persons at risk. As we previously covered, those 5 steps will identify all of that information and then ensure that you've got a suitable fire risk assessment. And as I say, a competent person will produce you a document that's many pages long that covers all of those areas to make sure you've got a suitable and sufficient fire risk assessment. But once that fire risk assessment is done, it shouldn't just hide away in a folder on a shelf. It is a live document, So it is a document that you should review constantly. If there's any changes made to the premises, as I said, or any alterations to the way you're running that premises, update your fire risk assessment. Otherwise, it comes out, gets dusted off once every year to just have a signature on it. Doesn't make it sufficient and suitable for the risk that you've got there. Because as I'm sure you all well know, things change over time, and sometimes things change quite rapidly. So it is a live document, to make sure it does maintain and update at all times. So some of you are hopefully thinking about, oh yes, my fire risk assessment, I haven't had that out lately, or oh yes, I read that the other day, which is great. But have a think about, when was your last review of your fire risk assessment? It should be the go-to document for all your fire safety matters. It'll highlight any needs that need to be recorded and record those measures implemented and the reasoning behind those measures. And as I said, that live document, keep updating it if need be. Does your fire risk assessment make reference to relevant persons? And as I say, these are anybody who's lawfully on the premises. So your residents, your staff, your visitors, any contractors come on site. If someone like myself comes on and carries out a fire safety audit, I'm now a relevant person on that premises. So they all need to be accounted for. What are the hazards and the control measures? So what hazards have we come across? And what are the measures that we're going to implement to control these hazards? An example of this is we've had on repeated occurrences is introduction of new equipment that may require charging. So there might be mobility scooters or electrical lifts, hoists, etc. They come into the premises. It needs to be thought of, so where can we charge these, when, and how can it be done safely? And unfortunately, it's often where the nearest socket is, which is often in a corridor to the closest to the room where it's required. Now, that's not the best place to put it. So that's why you need to think about where, when, and how can this be done. So what type of evacuation plan do you have in place? Hopefully most, if not all of you, are aware of progressive horizontal evacuation, or PHE, if you can't remember what it stands for, which is a really good system to have in place, especially with the vulnerability and the mobility levels that some of the homes have. But is this suitable for your premises? And the reason why we say that is because of compartmentation suitability. And we'll cover it a little bit more in a moment. So what are our significant findings? So a significant finding is something that's highlighted by the fire risk assessment that needs to be addressed, and it'll have a risk rating, and they normally use sort of moderate, tolerable, intolerable, or maybe a traffic light system, depending on the risk assessment. So that significant finding will highlight an issue that needs dealing with, and then via the risk rating of that risk and the hazards and the risks that it causes, it'll have a rating of how quickly we need to deal with that situation. So if it's something that needs to be moved straight away, like our charging our mobility scooter in a corridor, that can be done straight away, but it's still a significant finding. So that needs to be recorded on your fire risk assessment and then signed when it's addressed. So if that's removed that day, signed and dated that day, then that significant finding is dealt with. If there's something that needs a little bit more time to do, then that significant finding needs to have a timescale attached to it, ideally. So if it involves getting contractors in to do structural works or maybe replace a fire door, etc., use your fire risk assessment on your significant findings and then date, time that, sign that, and gives it that timescale of how and when it's going to be rectified. So how does the fire risk assessment, which we've been speaking about a lot over the last few moments, how does that ensure compliance with the fire safety order? So under the fire safety order, people like myself, fire safety inspectors and officers, we have powers attached to us under that order following our training that we've done. And the local authority has a duty to ensure premises are compliant with the fire safety order. Fire safety inspecting officers carry out fire safety audits using a generic form to assess the level of compliance under each of the articles in the order. Some of you may have already had this undertaken, may be aware of the fire safety audit. Hopefully some of you have. If you haven't, then again, do contact us, because we should have, at least in the last 3 years, been around every residential care premises within the county. Unfortunately, the system is very large, and we've got nearly 35,000 premises that we have to audit, and we've only got 15 inspecting officers. So some do get missed. So if you haven't been audited, please do let us know, and we'll come and have a chat and see how we can help you as well. So an audit can be undertaken via the risk-based inspection program. So within each fire authority, they have a program that they use that assesses the level of risk from information put into the system, from incidents, from data that's come through from local government or from national, and it will produce a risk rating. Care homes are obviously of a higher risk because they're a sleeping accommodation, and also because of vulnerability factors. So our risk-based inspection program will throw out premises that need to be checked. Care homes do require an audit approximately every 3 years. So like I say, if you haven't seen anyone from the fire service waving their badge around saying, "I'll come here to do a fire safety audit," please do let us know, because it's imperative that we make sure everybody is compliant. So we may get a complaint. So that might be from a staff member, might be from a resident, might be from a visitor. If they feel there's something not quite right and they complain to the fire service, we can come out and carry out a fire safety audit to make sure that the premises is compliant. And the other one we come out for is for a post-fire incident, which is the ones we don't like doing, because that means obviously something's gone wrong with the fire safety measures in the first place. But it's imperative that we go out and find out why that fire happened. And that, even if that's just a small fire, and it was dealt with very quickly, no one hurt, which is always a good result, but we'll still need to come out and find out why that fire has occurred. So in reality, we come out every 3 years to do a fire risk assessment on care home premises, but we could come and do a risk-based inspection program audit. Then the following week, we may get a complaint, so we'll come out and do another one. And then the following week, there might be a small fire, so we'll come out and do another one. So just because you've had one audit in it once every 3 years doesn't mean you're not going to get multiples within a small period of time. So each officer under the Article 27 powers of inspectors has the power to enforce the fire safety order and take appropriate action to ensure compliance and the safety of all relevant persons. So the power we have to enforce entitles us to produce notices will help you ensure compliance. These notices are in the form of what we call a notification deficiencies. So there's a few issues you've got on the premises that need addressing, and you'll be given a suitable timescale. This will be a fair timescale depending on the level of deficiencies that you've got. For example, if you've got construction work that needs doing, so some of your compartmentation may not be up to standard, we realise that's not going to be done overnight, and you'll need to get contractors in and get the work done correctly. So you'll get a period of time to do that. What we can do then is pass up to enforcement notices. So if there's a lot of issues that need dealing with, and it's going to produce the risk is then a lot greater because of these deficiencies, we can produce an enforcement notice, which gives a shorter time scale. And that enforcement notice will then sit on the public records on the business, on the responsible person, saying that there was an enforcement notice produced. The other thing we can do is prohibition notices. So we have the powers to close somewhere down that we deem is got immediate danger to relevant persons. So there's something going on in the premises that we feel is going to hurt someone from fire very soon and very badly. So we have the power to close premises down. Now, with regards to residential care homes, before you all get really scared by the word prohibition, we're not in the nature of chucking everybody out and just to close a building down. What we will do is try and make sure we educate and help you to ensure that place is safe in the event of a fire. So what do we find from these audits? Well, the first thing we normally find for care homes is normally a good cup of tea and a good cup of coffee. So keep that up because we appreciate that. So this is what we find from some of these audits. So this graph shows some of what we call deficiencies under the articles. So you've got the articles across the bottom. Don't worry too much about what the numbers mean. I'll go through some of those in a moment. Otherwise, you'll get really lost in the articles of the order. But these show some deficiencies that have been found over the past 3 years by some of the officers. It's not all premises we've done, so we've taken a cross-section of premises and identified some of the more common deficiencies from that cross-section from across the board and through the past 3 years. And as you can see, it shows a pattern of articles over the period that are common across multiple premises. So Articles 8, Articles 14, 23 and 9. So pretty much anything over 25%. So that's a quarter in effect of our premises that have shown these deficiencies and these failings of on the actual articles. Now, these failings aren't always necessarily intentional. So we realise that. Sometimes it's just a case of taking the eye off the ball. Various reasons behind that. COVID is a big factor. Last year, it's impacted everybody massively. Care homes are obviously one of them as well, which is right at the top of the list with COVID. What we found was everyone was so COVID aware and COVID scared that some of the fire safety measures were lost. But fire safety and COVID policies don't override each other. They still both need to be maintained. We certainly found it in schools where all the doors were opened. So all fire doors were wedged open or kept open. And obviously if there's a fire, the fire would have just gone straight through the fire, through the school, through the building, and not been a good thing. So we had to find measures to put something in place for these doors that they would close in the event of a fire, which isn't easy to do, but there is stuff out there to do. So again, if there's anything in your premises that you've got COVID policy in, make sure it doesn't negate the actual fire safety side of it. And if you've got any question on that, then please do chuck me an email and we shall help you out. So as you can see, some of the articles on there have got 0%. And the reason for this is some of those may not relate directly to the type of premises that we're talking about today. But it's not to say that they might not be relevant in some premises. And an article I'll use, for example, is number 22, which under the order is cooperation and coordination. So that basically means if there's two types of businesses running in a premises, they'll both have their own risk assessments and both have their own fire safety policy and their own evacuation policy, but they need to talk to each other. And we certainly get it in some care homes. So you may have a hairdresser that rents part of the building, which is really useful for the residents, but they'll have their own standalone fire safety policy, but it needs to tie in with the rest of the premises. So just because it's a 0 on there, it's probably just because we haven't come across it so often, but it still might be relevant for the premises. So I just want to reiterate that just because it's 0% doesn't mean it's not relevant to care homes. So this is some of the, just highlight some of the deficiencies that we've come across with relates to the articles. So if you remember, Article 8 and 14 were very high percentages. Article 8, duty to take general fire precautions. These are common factors that we find. And Article 14, emergency routes and exits. Article 9 is fire risk assessment. And Article 23 is the general duties of employees. So these are the ones that we find common issues with. So what are some of these deficiencies that we find in a breakdown? And as you can hopefully see on there, if you can see the writing's okay. Fire risk assessment. So number 9, we've already spoke about it. We often find that they're very basic, and it's often because it's written by someone who doesn't understand what they're writing about. And that's not to say because they're just not interested in it, or they just haven't had the education, haven't had the training. Significant findings are not recorded. So as I said, they find some problems, but they don't jot them down. They're not making a list of those, and they're not being recorded when they're being dealt with either. And it's not updated. As I said, it's a live document. So it needs to be continually updated if there's any changes, and it should be reviewed annually. So number 8, as I said, is another high. Is duty to take general fire precautions. This is a bit of a cover-all, so it hits a lot of areas within the premises. One of the main ones we find within, we're finding within care home premises is compartmentation. So if you don't understand what compartmentation is, that's basically the brick walls or the block walls that divides up the building. Certainly if you're going to use progressive horizontal evacuation, your compartmentation needs to be really, really good. It needs to be absolutely 100%, because that's what's going to stop smoke and fire getting to somewhere of a place of relative safety. What we find with this compartmentation is often if you get maintenance works done, electricians, plumbers, cable, internet, whatever bits and pieces, utilities that are then fed through the premises, gets a big hole drilled in it and a cable run through it and then left. So there's now a breach within that compartmentation. If there's a big hole in a wall or into a door, it's no longer a solid wall. It will let smoke fire through and it's not doing its job. So what we're finding is some of the works aren't being fire stopped. And by that, we mean any holes that cables have run through, it then needs to be blocked and filled with a suitable material. So anybody who's doing any building works need to make sure that they're competent and understand that it's not just as easy as knocking a hole through a wall and putting a cable through or a pipe. It's about ensuring the integrity of that wall by putting in a suitable material and fire stopping it. Fire loading is another one we find. Storage is always a problem. Pretty much wherever you go, even in my own house, I've never got enough storage, but fire loading. So often cupboards are filled with boxes or lots of linen that's not required anymore. They'll be stacked right up to the top of the shelves, packed in, or maybe even left, which is even worse, in corridors or under staircases. Now, anywhere that's required to be sterile, like a corridor or your fire escape stairs, needs to ensure there's nothing else in it. So you can't store any mobility scooters in a stairwell, for example. You shouldn't store any flammable materials or any flammable liquids in a stairwell. Cupboards should be maintained to ensure minimum level of fire loading, because it's quite easy if it gets too close to a light fitting, for example, heat exchange. So ensuring your fire loading isn't too high. So just assess your storage. If you don't need stuff, then maybe it's time to have a bit of a clear out, springtime clear out. So one of the other sections we spoke about was emergency routes and exits. So you've got MOE on there, which is means of escape, and this is our corridors. This is our routes out. So our means of escape should be kept sterile. So if that's our route to our fire exit, to our ultimate safety, there needs to be nothing else in it, or certainly to a very minimum. And that means that there's less chance of any obstructions for people using those on the way out, and also it won't exacerbate if there's any fire loading or fire situation that's involved in one of these means of escape. So it's also for the purposes of fire service coming back in as well. As you can imagine, if you're coming into a building that's full of smoke, it's dark and noisy and very hot, last thing you want to be doing is tripping over bits and pieces. So our means of escape needs to be kept clear and sterile, and that goes for your escape stairs as well. So if you've got multiple stairs in your building, then should be lobbied with a door at the top, a door at the bottom, and a door on each level, and they should be clear of all anything else that you want to put in there. It should be completely clear and sterile. FDs are fire doors. So we have a lot of abbreviations in the fire service. Fire doors, so there should be a suitable fire door set, and ensuring that it sits properly in the frame with a minimal gap, no more than 3 mm gap around the whole of the door, and strips and seals should be prevalent. So fire safe intumescent strips, if you've heard of those, fire strips and seals. So in the event of a fire, they'll seal that gap up and stop any passage of smoke or fire. Emergency lighting, or EL. So ensure emergency lighting is suitable right throughout the premises. We're finding that it's not always the right type, or maybe it's not in the right place, or it's not being maintained properly, so it's not working. An inner room. So under the fire safety order, we are allowed, under guidance, you're allowed an inner room. So that's a room off another room, off a corridor. But you can't have another room off the other room. So if you've got a corridor with a room off it and then it's got a little office room at the back of there. That inner room shouldn't happen. So we shouldn't have inner rooms. So you need to be aware of the construction of the building. It's more difficult in some older converted premises. If it's a purpose-built care home, often it's designed, certainly recently times, because it's designed to the standards it should be, so you don't have these occurrences. But if it's an older converted building from a few hundred years ago, for example, often you find strange layouts. We need to be aware that we don't have inner rooms. So the other one we scored higher on was general duties of employees at work. So again, it's 25% of the premises that I had a look at scored on this system, and it's basically down to what your employees are doing. So the training is another factor that we need to talk about, but it's also what your employees are doing during their day-to-day stuff. So as they're walking around doing their duties and looking after the residents, fire safety is probably way down their list of things to think about, but it is still prevalent and should still be considered. And what we find is a lot of fire doors are being held open, either wedged or they may be held open with a hook system. And any fire door that's no longer in the hole is no longer a fire door. It needs to be in its aperture in the wall to do its job in the event of fire. So what we need to do is make sure we educate our employees to make sure they don't wedge any fire doors open. And if there's any that have to be thought of, well, that one's used a lot because a lot of people are passing through it. It keeps open and shut. It's getting broken all the time. It's costing us a fortune. I will just put a little hook and eye on there just to hold it open, and then we'll shut it later. Well, that's not suitable enough because that door needs to close in the event of a fire. So what we say you need to have a look at is attaching that door to your fire alarm system. So when your fire alarm goes off, that door will be on a mag lock release and the door will shut on its own. That way, during your operating hours and there's no fire, you could walk through the doorway quite easily without causing too much damage. A lot of people passing through it. But in the event of fire, that door will close under the maglock system connected to the automatic fire detection. And the other thing we find are fire doors that are supposed to be locked, and they should have a sign on it, fire door keep locked. We often find that they're open. And again, it's because generally employees are going in and out of those doors. But again, it needs to be locked for a reason. So we need to make sure, educating our employees that even on their day-to-day duties, fire is still part of their duty to ensure everybody is safe. Just a quick cover of some of the other ones that we had as well that came up. Training, so high level of training for all care home residents, staff, which we appreciate. But what we're finding is it's some of the e-learning training isn't really been taken on board. So they'll sit in front of a computer, watch a video for a bit, maybe a couple of questions. But then when we question them when we come around, they get that blank look or rabbit in the headlights type look, and they've got no idea or they've forgotten, for no fault of their own. So you just need that staff confirmation of that. So any training that you do undertake, make sure you record it, Q&A session, and some of the training can be quite fun to do as a group as well, and then just getting confirmation of that learning. And we also find in a lot of evac chairs being put in premises, initial trainings carried out for a couple of the staff, but then staff move on and then no one knows how to use them. So again, it's another area that we find that people aren't trained on using the equipment that you've got in there for the purposes. Another one that we have in place that we find as well is fire detection. That comes up occasionally as not having a suitable fire detection system. Now you might think what you've got is suitable, but what you should be looking at is a full L1 system across it. So that's a fire detection head in every room and cupboard in the premises. And what we're finding now is you didn't need to used to have them in toilets or bathrooms, but because of the implementation of electrical hoists to use into the baths, which obviously helps the residents keep clean, it's then changed that use of that bathroom almost. It's not a lower risk room anymore because you've put an electrical item into it. So you might need to think about upgrading the door and also upgrading your fire alarm system. And just speak to your fire alarm supplier, whoever does your testing on that, just speak to them and make sure you've got the right coverage across the premises. And if you haven't, it's not going to cost a huge amount of money just to extend that into another room. It's just another detector head that they can put into it for you. So some of the other common deficiencies that we come across, and these are more regional information as well, that's come across from Essex and Cambridgeshire and Norfolk and Hertfordshire. Some of the other bits and pieces that they've come across. Company policies are understood. So you have an evacuation plan in place, but then again, you go and talk to your staff and they're not really sure about what that is, especially for PHE. And as you further down there, you can see progressive horizontal evacuation. It's kind of talked to everybody, and maybe drilled once. And I appreciate it's not easy to process that and practice that. Sorry. Which means moving residents about, and that's the last thing they want to be doing. They don't want to be moved about too much. But you do need to gauge a full understanding of what that means about moving people from one compartment area. So that might be 3, 4, 5 bedrooms into an adjacent compartment area that keeps them safe for a relative period of time while the fire's dealt with, rather than a full evacuation. But your additional area, your adjacent area, needs to be able to accommodate the persons that are in it and also the persons that you're moving into it. So if you've got any questions about PHE and trying to understand that fully, do email me, and we'll see if it might even be worth putting something together at a later date as another webinar to just cover progressive horizontal evacuation, because we're finding that not all staff really understands what that means. Some of the other ones on there that's come up is staff numbers. So we find during the day you've got more than sufficient staff, or people are up and about moving around, which is what you need. But at night it might go down to a small crew of 2 or 3, and they may well be agency staff who have come in at the last minute. And what we're saying is that still enough to carry out your fire evacuation plan? If you have a fire at night and everybody's asleep, are 2 or 3 persons going to be enough to carry out moving 4, 5, 6 residents into a safe area while they're waiting for other persons to turn up? So you need to review your staff numbers. Are they suitable for the risk that you've got and the persons that you've got in your care? So compartmentation, as I've already spoken about, is another one that keeps coming up. Ensuring that compartmentation is solid, that doors fit, that there's no gaps in them, there's no holes drilled in through walls, and that will aid your progressive horizontal evacuation, and make sure that there's no cavities above doors. We have gone to places in the past where a nice, lovely door set, perfect gap, nice, good, solid compartmentation wall. You lift a false ceiling up, and it only stops there. It doesn't go up to the height of the actual next floor. So it's effectively useless because there's a gap 500, 600, 700 mil above it where fire and smoke is just going to happily travel. So do be aware of your compartmentation. So fire risk assessments, again, assessing that competency. As I said, managers often conduct a fire risk assessment. And just think about what level of training you might have had. Do you think it's sufficient enough? Do you require more to do a fire risk assessment? And if you don't, then get somebody in who is competent. At the end of the day, you're putting your name on a document in a court of law is going to have your name on it, and you'll be responsible for it. The other thing that's not on here that that's coming up quite a lot recently is the consideration of sprinkler systems. So sprinkler systems are becoming more prevalent in many premises, and they do a very, very good job at slowing the fire down. They don't always extinguish them, but they'll certainly knock them back, knock down the hot gases and the smoke, and give everyone more of a chance to evacuate or to move to a safer place. They're often overlooked because they think it's an expensive system, but there has been cases in the past, one in Ipswich, where they installed a sprinkler system that cost them about £35,000, which you think, oh, that's a lot of money, but that's also probably equivalent to maybe 2 members of staff, depending on what level of training they've had, to walk around the place. And then all you've got to do is make sure that sprinkler system is maintained once a year, and it will knock back and hold back a fire of a reasonable standard to help everybody get out safely. So sprinklers are something that are being pushed very, very hard, or misting systems as they're sometimes called, and there's various versions of them, but you'd need to speak to a competent person and assess exactly what your needs would be for those premises. And that's me finished. So I'm happy to try and answer some questions if there's been some in the chat. And if I can't answer them, then I will pass them, pass them over to me, and I will get a reply to you as soon as I can.
We've got a question that's come up here. I think it's a question, Neil, around evacuation plans, how to gain cooperation from local businesses that are in close proximity and come up as a deficiency on the fire risk assessment.
Okay.
I don't know who put the comment in there, but yeah, so I think the gist of it is that basically there's business in close proximity and that doesn't come up as highly rated on a fire risk assessment.
Yeah.
I guess it's a tricky one, isn't it?
It is a tricky one, yeah, because when we're looking at doing an audit, because it's when you say local business in close proximity, what do you mean by close proximity? Is it part of the same structure of the building, or is it across the road? I think the terms of close proximity, or is it right next door to it? If it's a premises that's going to have an impact on the care home, for example, if it's a high risk premises that does high risk processes, for example, then you need to ensure you speak to them about that and say, well, what do you do? What do we do? And under Article 22 is all about cooperation and coordination. So it's about liaising with these other people, talking it through, what are the risks and how can we make them safer? So it's all part of that fire risk assessment. If it's close proximity, as I said, within the premises, under Article 22, you have to comply with that. Sometimes it's not as easy and straightforward as that, and I understand that some people don't always want to talk to other people. And if you do come across places like that, please do let us know, speak to the fire service, and we'll quite happily come and have a chat and see if we can help out with that. But it is all about talking with them, seeing what they've got in place, see if that has an impact on what your premises has in place. And if it's in part of the same building, then yes, under legislation, they have to have that done. And if you find a premises within the same building that has no fire risk assessment, has no evacuation plan, then effectively they're breaching the fire safety order. So do let them know, and we'll come out and carry out an audit and make sure that they're compliant.
I'm guessing this is really the sort of what you were saying is it's sort of, yes, there's a compliance aspect, but you can also advise on good practice as well. So it's a source of help and advice. I've got another question that's come up saying, no, the legislation doesn't cover domiciliary care, but is there any guidance available for those who are operating in domiciliary care sector?
Yeah, so domiciliary care, just so I fully understand, is care for persons in their own homes and smaller premises.
That's correct, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I want to make sure I've got the right word for it. Yeah, there is legislation or guidance been released recently, which is called, I had it then, which is a specialist care guidance document. It's been produced through the NFCC, National Fire Chiefs Council, and that gives you some idea of what you need to put in place for domiciliary care. And we're finding it more prevalent as well. I've certainly done recently a couple of premises that have been a converted house, an old 3-story house. It's then converted down into individual flats for care residents, and then they're having someone actually move in and live with them because they need additional, but they still get their own. They're still getting their own freedom to an extent, but they've also got the care. So the order then applies to that premises because there's employees on the premises. What we're finding is that those premises where people are going in, looking after them for a few hours and maybe coming out, and that's someone's own home. And as I said, the order doesn't apply to a single residence, a single private dwelling. But because people are going in there, an employee is going in to look after these people, there is that duty of care under the fire safety. So that's where you want to look at the document for the specialist care home. And I can see someone's just asked where they get that from. I shall put a link if you like. I'll send a link over.
Yeah, and I'll send it around to everybody after the webinar. Yeah. So that's fine. There's another request in here. Would like another webinar to look at PHE in more detail, please. PHE.
Progressive evacuation.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah, I can speak to. Yeah, we can get something knocked up for that, because it's something that is used a lot, and I don't think it's always fully understood. So yeah, more than happy to put together something for that.
Yep, and we can facilitate that as well and send out any invites for that. Does anybody else have any questions at this stage? As I pointed out earlier on in the session, everything today, we've recorded the webinar, so obviously Neil's slides and the information that he's basically given out, you'll be able to go back to that. And I think more importantly is you'll be able to cascade this information on to colleagues and some of those people within your care setting who need that additional guidance and probably need a better level of understanding. Because am I right, Neil, that what we're talking about here is an understanding is what's lacking sometimes, and that's what causes people to sort of, forget what they should be doing to keep premises safe.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, you cover the training, which is good. Do a bit of fire awareness training, or even more intensive training. Yeah, and it's because of people don't tend to need a fire engine until there's a fire.
Yeah.
And after 15 years, I totally understand that fully. But having that awareness of why you've had that training, a little bit of refresher training if people aren't remembering, is really important moving forward, because then you're stopping the fire before it happens effectively. There'll always be fires. We always work on the premise of when, not if, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yes, certainly moving forward, having that awareness of what your responsibilities are from the top all the way down to all your staff members really goes a long way to making that premises safe.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks very much, Neil. And thanks everybody for your attention this afternoon. We had a good turnout, and as I say, we'll share this. It'll be on the provider update. It'll also be on the Care Development East website, and we'll put it out in our weekly newsletter as well, together with some of the guidance that Neil has outlined specific to certain care settings, and certainly we'll discuss with colleagues at Adult Care Services about running an additional webinar as well. But I'd like to thank you all for your attention this afternoon, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day and have a good bank holiday. Thanks very much.
I've just put my
Sure.
on there so if anybody has any questions afterwards, because often you think about things later, please do email me and I'll get back to you as soon as possibly can.
That's great. Thanks very much, Neil, and thanks for everyone for this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.